Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a case that's really stuck with me. The Dnipro Maniacs.
Yeah, this one is definitely out there.
Back in 2007, these three guys, just young men really, from Ukraine, they went on this, terrifying rampage.
It's one of those cases that makes you wonder, what takes someone, seemingly ordinary people, and turns them into, killers. Cold-blooded killers.
Right, and that's what we're trying to figure out today, right?
Yeah.
We've got all these news articles from back then, a surprisingly thorough Wikipedia page on this, and even a podcast episode that dives into their whole supposed motive.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
So picture this. It's summer 2007 in Dnipro, Ukraine. Just a normal city, people going about their lives, and boom, these brutal murders, they just throw everything into chaos.
And the random nature of it all, right? It wasn't just one type of person targeted or one place. These guys, they were everywhere.
It's like they wanted to instill fear, terror, just blanket the whole city.
Exactly.
And at the center of it all, you have Igor Supruniuk,
Yeah.
Viktor Sayenko, and Alexander Hunsa. They weren't strangers.
Yeah.
Those guys grew up together, even went to the same school.
Yeah.
But even back then, there were signs, especially with Igor.
Oh, yeah. His thing with Hitler, yeah, that's not normal. We're talking selfies with these drawn-on Hitler mustaches, graffiti. I even read he was obsessed with sharing a birthday with Hitler.
Okay, see, now that's just creepy. Gives me chills.
Right. And it gets worse. It went beyond just, a weird fascination. They started with animals. Yeah, torturing and killing strays, filming it. Criminologists call this the graduation hypothesis. Basically, some violent people, this is how do I put this? They practice before moving on to,
Humans. God, that's chilling.
Yeah, it's a disturbing pattern.
So it didn't end there. This was just the beginning.
Sadly, yeah. They eventually moved on to robberies. But not just your regular, grab some cash and go. We're talking brutal attacks. People seriously hurt. This is actually when Alexander, the third guy, Hansa, he backed out. Said it was going too far.
Probably a smart move
in
hindsight. But way too late to change anything. It's like the violence, it got to them.
Took hold.
And their weapon of choice, the thing that became like their calling card, was a hammer. Just brutal. Their first victims, they were just weeks apart. First, it was Yekaterina Ilchenko, just a young woman walking home. Then Roman Tatarevich, a homeless man sleeping on a bench. Both attacked from behind, both beaten to death with a hammer. I mean, no wonder the whole city was terrified.
And get this, the police in Dnipropetrovsk, they're clueless at this point, completely out of their depth. They're dismissing these murders as random, unconnected, even though it's the same MO.
Hold on. So they didn't even think they had a serial killer situation on their hands. Are you serious?
I know, right? This is where that whole Soviet Union legacy thing comes in. Back then, they didn't do serial killers. It didn't exist in their world.
Because it didn't fit their whole perfect society image.
Bingo. They cared more about looking like they had everything under control than actually, protecting their citizens. Which, ironically, made them more vulnerable to this exact kind of crime. Crazy crime.
It's insane. So they've got a city living in fear, a police force that's in denial, and these two guys, they're just getting started. What happens next?
Well, July 7th, things escalate. The maniacs attack two 14-year-old boys, Andrei Sidyuk and Vadim Lyakov. They were out fishing, and this is a turning point in the case.
How so? What made this attack different?
For one, Vadim Lyakov, he survives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he actually manages to escape, and he gives the police a description of the attackers. This finally forces them to admit, okay, we might have a serious problem here.
So they can't ignore it anymore.
Exactly. And the fact that they targeted kids, well, that just amplified the terror. It wasn't just adults who were potential victims anymore.
Everyone was a target.
Right, nobody felt safe. You mentioned Vadim's testimony was crucial, and but get this, the police initially suspected him of killing his friend.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, they thought maybe he made up the story to cover for himself. They held him for questioning, wouldn't even let him call his parents. It's just another example of how badly they mishandled this whole thing.
So even with this new evidence, a witness, they're still trying to bury this thing.
It seems that way. Yeah. They finally bring in detectives from Kiev, the capital, but they still keep everything hush-hush. No public warnings, no descriptions of the suspects released, nothing.
Can you imagine living in that city, knowing these murders are happening, but having zero information from the people who are supposed to be protecting you? The fear must have been unbelievable.
Oh, absolutely. And as you can imagine, with this wall of silence from the authorities, the killings, they didn't stop.
Yeah.
One of the most disturbing cases, and this is the one that really put this whole thing on the map, is Sergei Yatsenko.
Okay. Yeah, that name rings a bell. Remind me about him.
So Sergei was this man who had already beaten cancer, survived a near-fatal accident, like this guy had been through it, and then he becomes one of their victims. And what makes his case even more horrific is that his murder, it was caught on video.
This is the three guys, one hammer video, right?
The one and only. It's brutal. 8 minutes. They attack him with a hammer, stab him with a screwdriver. It's tough to watch, even now.
You have to wonder, why film it? What was the point of documenting their crimes like that?
Right. It's a question that's haunted everyone about this case. Some people think they were making snuff films, to sell.
Like on the dark web or something.
Yeah. There's this creepy story from one of Saprignac's old classmates. He claims Saprignac was talking about selling videos to some, rich website guy overseas.
Did the police ever find anything to back that up?
Nope. It's one of the many unanswered questions from this whole thing. Were they bragging? Was it some messed up fantasy? Or was there more to it that they just missed? Nobody knows.
It's scary to think about. Those videos, especially the one that got out, they had a huge impact. Way beyond just Dnipro.
Oh, for sure. The Three Guys, One Hammer video, it became this, cultural phenomenon in the worst way possible. A symbol of how cruel people can be.
You're talking about copycat killers, right?
Yeah.
Like those Academy Maniacs in Russia. Weren't they inspired by all of this?
Yeah, they straight up modeled their crimes after the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs. Same weapons, same types of victims. It's like the reign of terror, in a way. It continued even after Saprignac and Sayenko were caught.
Speaking of which, how did they finally get caught? Was it the video?
You'd think, right. But no, it was way more, normal. Anticlimactic, even. Saprignac, he tried to pawn a phone he'd stolen from one of the victims.
No way, yep.
Thankfully, the guy at the pawn shop, he got suspicious and called the cops.
So pawn shop takedown brought the whole thing crashing down.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's how it goes sometimes. They tracked the phone signal, and that was it. They arrested Sayenko right there in the pawn shop with him. And Hansa, the third guy, remember he'd already backed out, they got him at his house.
You mentioned earlier there were rumors about their families, that they were connected, powerful. Did that play into any of this? The arrest, the trial, any of it?
Oh, absolutely. As soon as the arrests were made, the families, they lawyered up, claimed their sons were innocent, said the evidence was planted, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. Classic damage control.
Exactly. There were even accusations of police brutality. They claimed the police beat a confession out of Igor. They threw everything they could at the wall, hoping something would stick.
Did it work?
Not a chance. The evidence was just too strong. They had the murder weapons, the stolen stuff, and of course the photos and videos. It was an open and shut case.
So what happened at the trial? What was their defense, given, all the evidence? So what happened at the trial? What was their defense, given, all the evidence?
Well, they basically tried two things. First, they went after the prosecution's case, tried to say the evidence was planted, tampered with, you name it, that the confessions were forced. They wanted to make it look like these guys were scapegoats, that the police were just desperate to close the case.
So kind of a long shot, but I guess worth a try.
Right. But then, and this is where it gets weird, they try to shift the blame. Especially for Viktor Sayenko.
Shift the blame? How do you even do that when you're caught red-handed?
Well, Sayenko, he claimed he was terrified of Saprignac, said he was forced to do it all against his will. Remember those rumors about Igor's family, the connections? Well, Sayenko's dad, he actually goes public with this whole story about how the police are covering for some bigwig family, didn't want their kid mixed up in this whole mess.
Oh, come on. So now there's a conspiracy too.
Yeah, basically. They threw everything they could at the wall, hoping something would stick. But the jury didn't buy it. The evidence was just too much.
So what happened? What was the verdict?
Both Igor Saprignac and Viktor Sayenko got life in prison, no parole. Alexander Hansa, the one who backed out early on, he got 9 years for the robberies.
So justice was served, but I still feel like, I don't know, there's still so many unanswered questions. Why? Why did they do it?
It's the million-dollar question, right? The prosecution, they never really figured out a motive. They kept saying it was morbid self-affirmation.
Morbid what?
Self-affirmation. These killings, they were about power control. It wasn't about money or anything else. It was about them feeling powerful, superior to their victims.
Man, that's messed up. And it's even more disturbing knowing that it inspired those other killings, like those Academy Maniacs. It makes you wonder, that video, the one that got leaked, did that play a role?
It's hard to say for sure. Some experts think that when these things get a lot of attention, media coverage, it can encourage copycats. But it's complicated. There's no easy answer.
It's terrifying, honestly. Makes you think about the media's role in all of this.
Right.
Right? Where's the line between, reporting the news and potentially making things worse.
Big questions, for sure. But one thing's certain, this case, it left a mark. On Ukraine, and on how we understand or try to understand this kind of violence, the kind that seems to come out of nowhere.
It really makes you think, evil can be anywhere, even in the most ordinary places. This has been heavy, but really fascinating. Thanks for walking us through it all.
Anytime. Like I said, this one stays with you.
And to everyone listening, if you want to dive deeper into this case, we'll have links to some of the articles and stuff in the show notes. But just a heads up, it's some intense stuff. You've been warned.